At exactly 03:17 hours on March 19, 2026, the Persian Gulf ceased to be the world's energy highway and became the world's most dangerous battlefield. On the third floor of the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, a senior duty officer stared at his AN/TPY-2 forward-based radar feed and watched something that made every nerve in his body fire at once. Not one inbound track, not two. 47 simultaneous radar returns climbing out of Iranian territory at supersonic velocity, their trajectories fanning across the Gulf like the fingers of an iron fist closing around the throat of global civilization. The IRGC's Aerospace Force had just pulled the trigger on Operation Zulfikar, the most ambitious multi-domain strike package the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had ever attempted. And the target was not a military base, not a carrier strike group. The target was the world's energy supply itself. This was not a retaliatory volley fired in panic. It was a premeditated, surgically planned strike campaign 3 weeks in the making, a direct response to Israel's destruction of the South Pars gas field the day prior. Tehran had made a cold, strategic calculation. If they could not deter U.S.-Israeli airstrikes through military confrontation alone, they would reach into the arteries of the global economy and squeeze until the West blinked. The IRGC commanders knew exactly what they were targeting: Ras Laffan Industrial City in northern Qatar, the single facility responsible for nearly 30% of the world's entire liquefied natural gas supply. A petrochemical fortress covering 106 square kilometers, home to the world's largest concentration of LNG trains, Qatar Energy's export terminals, and over 14,000 workers from 46 nations. One well-placed strike on the right cryogenic tank could trigger a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, a bleave visible from the International Space Station. Simultaneously, on a separate launch axis 400 kilometers to the northwest, IRGC ground forces in Khuzestan province rolled Fateh 313 solid-fuel ballistic missile transporter erector launches into pre-surveyed firing positions. Their targets: Saudi Arabia's Mina al-Ahmadi oil refinery complex in Kuwait, Bahrain's Isa Air Base, the forward operating hub of U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, and the Ras Tanura offshore export terminal on the Saudi eastern province coast, the single pipeline node through which over 6% of global daily oil output flows. On the radar screens at CENTCOM's Combined Air Operations Center, the launch signatures bloomed in rapid succession: AN/TPY-2 early warning radar, SBIRS satellite thermal infrared detection, E3 Sentry AWACS loitering at 35,000 feet over the northern Gulf. All three redundant layers of the theater ballistic missile defense architecture screamed the same alert simultaneously: ballistic missile threat. Track count: 47. Estimated time of flight: 9 minutes. What happened in those 9 minutes would determine whether the Gulf's energy infrastructure survived the night. At Al Udeid, U.S. Air Force General Marcus Whitfield slammed his palm on the fusion operations desk and issued a single command through the SIPRNet encrypted network that cascaded through every U.S. and allied military node in the theater. ThreatCon Delta. Engage all inbound. Every Patriot PAC-3MSE battery across Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia powered its AN/MPQ-65 fire control radar to full active emission. On the USS Carney, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer conducting patrol in the Strait of Hormuz, the SPY-1D phased array radar painted the incoming missile swarm in brilliant hostile red on the AN/SWY-2 combat systems display. The Aegis Baseline 9 combat system required no further human input. In 0.8 seconds, it computed intercept solutions for 14 simultaneous tracks, opened the Mark 41 VLS deck plates, and threw SM-3 Block 2A interceptors into the stratosphere at Mach 15.6. But Tehran had anticipated this. They had studied every Patriot intercept from the past 4 weeks of war. They knew the reload cycle, They knew the salvo's spacing limitations, and so they had deliberately structured Operation Zulfikar in 3 synchronized echelons designed to exhaust and overwhelm the layered missile defense architecture from the outermost tier inward. The first echelon was not the real threat. The 47 Shahab-3 ballistic missiles arcing toward Qatar and Saudi Arabia were the noise, high radar cross-section targets lobbed in tight formation to force every PAC-3 battery to commit its interceptor inventory simultaneously. Each SM-3 kill consume 1 interceptor round from a magazine that takes 72 hours to reload at sea. Tehran had done the arithmetic. The real echelon was already in the air. At 03:22 hours, an MQ-9 Reaper drone crew loitering over the Persian Gulf at medium altitude detected an anomaly in the radar sea clutter 80 nautical miles south of Bandar Abbas, a heat signature. Then multiple heat signatures. Small, fast, hugging the wavetops at 50 feet AGL. Shade 238 turbojet-powered suicide drones, an upgraded variant of the Shahed 136 with a jet power plant capable of 350 knots, twice the intercept difficulty of its propeller-driven predecessor. Streamed out of Iranian coastal launch sites in a synchronized swarm of 38 airframes. Their flight profiles were algorithmically staggered in a mosaic attack geometry specifically designed to saturate the radar beam dwell time of the Phalanx CIWS systems defending Ras Laffan's perimeter. Each drone's inertial navigation system had been preloaded with GPS waypoints, updating in real time through a data link relay station concealed in a fishing vessel 20 nautical miles offshore. This was not a blunt instrument attack. This was a precision-engineered air defense suppression and saturation campaign executed with the methodical patience of a chess grandmaster. The Qatar Energy Emergency Response System, codenamed Granite Wall, activated at 03:24 hours. Emergency shutdown valves across all 7 LNG production trains at Ras Laffan slammed to the closed position in under 90 seconds, isolating the cryogenic process lines from ignition sources. American and Qatari Patriot crews worked in perfect coordination, their AN/MPQ-65 track radars slaving to the IBCS Integrated Air and Missile Defense Battle Command System data link network. Of the 47 ballistic missiles in the first echelon, 41 were destroyed in the boost or terminal phases. 6 penetrated the defensive umbrella. 3 struck uninhabited industrial infrastructure zones within Ras Laffan's outer perimeter, detonating with massive destructive force but failing to reach the primary LNG tank farms. 2 slammed into the eastern seawall. The 6th, a Fateh 313 variant, equipped with a terminal maneuvering re-entry vehicle, its trajectory altered in the final 12 seconds of flight by deployable aerodynamic fins, descended on Qatar's Northfield Offshore Platform Control Hub and detonated its 700-kilogram warhead. The explosion sent a column of white fire 400 meters into the Gulf sky. 14 workers were killed instantly. The Northfield Control Center, responsible for coordinating production from the world's largest single natural gas reservoir, went dark. Simultaneously, at 03:26 hours, the swarm of 38 Shahed 238 drones crossed the maritime defense perimeter. Phalanx CIWS systems aboard 4 U.S. naval vessels in the area engaged immediately, their 20mm M61A1 Vulcan rotary cannons hammering at 4,500 rounds per minute in rapid traverse bursts. Bahrain's own NASAM surface-to-air missile batteries vectored AM-120C AMRAAM interceptors across the threat axis. Saudi Patriot batteries suppressed the Mina al-Ahmadi approach corridor. 29 drones were destroyed. 9 broke through. Of those 9, 6 struck the outer tank farm at Ras Laffan's LNG Train 7 complex. The remaining 3 overflew the Qatar coastline and detonated inside the Ras Laffan port loading pier structures, gutting 2 LNG carrier berths and sending burning wreckage into the crystalline Gulf water. At Mina al-Ahmadi in Kuwait, 4 Iranian Fateh missiles impacted the refinery's crude distillation unit complex. The night sky over the northern Gulf turned orange and red as Kuwait's largest oil refinery began to burn. Do you understand what was at stake in those 11 minutes? The IRGC had not just attacked military infrastructure. They had attacked the economic central nervous system of the industrialized world. Every NATO country, every Asian economy dependent on Gulf LNG, every airline that uses jet fuel refined from Arabian crude, all of it teetered on the edge of catastrophe in the space of a quarter hour. What would you have done in General Whitfield's position? Comment your answer below. At 0331 hours, inside the intelligence fusion cell at U.S. Naval Forces Central Command in Bahrain, a signals intelligence intercept lit up the JWICS classified network with an alert that changed the nature of the battle entirely. NSA SIGINT platforms, EP-3, E-Ares, 2 electronic intelligence aircraft and signal satellites in geosynchronous orbit had been tracking an anomalous maritime surface contact for 6 days. A vessel designated Grey Merchant Alpha by CENTCOM's Maritime Operations Center, a converted Iranian ro-ro transport vessel, 210 meters in length, operating without AIS transponder in the northern Gulf, 90 nautical miles southwest of Bandar Abbas. For 6 days, it had been assessed as a logistics support ship. The SIGINT intercept changed that assessment forever. Grey Merchant Alpha was transmitting encrypted drone guidance uplink signals on X-band frequencies consistent with the IRGC drone carrier's command and control architecture. Its hangar bay was not carrying trucks or equipment. It was carrying and launching Shahed drones. Grey Merchant Alpha was Iran's newest covert asset, a drone carrier, roughly the size of a World War II escort carrier, improvised from commercial shipping, capable of launching dozens of suicide drones without any shore-based radar signature. CENTCOM had located the command node of the swarm attack. General Whitfield reviewed the intelligence summary for exactly 47 seconds. Then he transmitted a single targeting authorization on the SIPRNet strike network. At 0338 hours, 2 USA FB-2A Spirit stealth bombers, call signs Viper 1 and Viper 2, that had been holding in a racetrack orbit at 40,000 feet over the central Gulf since 2300 hours the previous night, received their strike coordinates through the low observable satellite communication system. Each aircraft carried 2 GBU-58 bunker busters in its internal weapon bay, pre-programmed with terminal GPS/INS guidance updates. At 0341 hours, Viper 1 rolled into its attack profile and released its first GBU-28. The weapon fell in silence for 43 seconds. The 4,400-pound penetrating warhead struck Grey Merchant Alpha's flight deck centerline at Mach 1.3, punching through the steel deck plates, detonating inside the hangar bay with catastrophic effect. Secondary explosions, 12 loaded Shahad, 238 drones detonating in chain reaction, tore the ship open from below. At 0342 hours and 19 seconds, Grey Merchant Alpha, Iran's covert drone carrier, was on fire and sinking. The command link to 22 drones still airborne lost signal coherence, and the weapons plunged harmlessly into the Gulf. CENTCOM announced the strike 6 hours later in a single, precise statement. Today, an Iranian drone carrier was struck and is now on fire. But the battle was nowhere near over. The third echelon of Operation Zulfikar had not yet been committed. At 0344 hours, Iranian Navy fast attack craft IRGC Naval Forces Zulfikar-class missile boats, 12 of them, accelerated from their concealed positions inside the Keshem Island coastal inlets at 45 knots. Their C-802 anti-ship missiles armed and locked onto the radar horizon contacts of U.S. and Allied naval vessels. Simultaneously, 2 Kilo-class submarines that had been lying silent on the Gulf bottom at periscope depth for 72 hours oriented their bow torpedo tubes toward the USS Carney and her escort. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the choke point through which 20% of all globally traded oil transits every single day, was about to become a kill zone. USS Carney's Aegis SPY-1D radar painted all 12 fast attack craft simultaneously. The combat systems officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Voss, had the fire control solution built in under 4 seconds. She looked at her captain. Her captain looked at the rules of engagement card. The fast attack craft were inside the 12 nautical mile territorial limit dispute zone. Every second of delay was 45 knots of closing speed. At 03:46 hours, USS Carney's Mark 41 VLS opened and expelled 8 RGM-84L Harpoon Block II anti-ship missiles in a 4-second ripple fire sequence. 3 miles away, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Lake Champlain added 6 more harpoons to the volley. At 03:48 hours, the first 4 harpoon impacts detonated against the lead elements of the IRGC fast attack boat formation, disintegrating 3 Zolfahar craft in sheets of orange flame that burned on the dark water like signal flares from hell. The remaining 9 fast attack craft scattered, abandoning their attack vectors. Beneath the surface, the 2 Iranian Kilo submarines that had been holding their fire heard the explosions above them and made the only rational decision available to a crew that had just watched its surface escort evaporate. They went deep, angled their bows toward Bandar Abbas, and ran at maximum silent speed. They did not fire. They did not have to. Their mission, to force U.S. warships to engage in a multi-domain saturation scenario that divided their defensive attention between surface, air, and subsurface threats simultaneously, had been accomplished. The Strait of Hormuz shipping lane was now effectively closed by threat environment alone. Lloyd's of London had already suspended war risk coverage. Every commercial tanker within 200 nautical miles had altered course away from the transit corridor. The world's largest oil shipping highway had gone dark, without a single tanker being sunk. At 04:12 hours, 4,800 miles away in the Indian Ocean south of Sri Lanka, the USS Boxer, an LHD-class amphibious assault ship carrying 2,500 U.S. Marines of the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, their MV-22B Osprey tiltrotor aircraft, AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, and F-35B Lightning II short takeoff/vertical landing fighters, received a flash precedence message from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. The order was terse: increase speed to maximum sustainable. New destination, Strait of Hormuz. Estimated time to theater, 18 days. The Marines were being sent not to fight. They were being sent to be visible. Because in the calculus of deterrence in the Persian Gulf, 2,500 Marines aboard an assault ship with F-35Bs on deck is a message that requires no translation. As dawn broke over the Gulf on March 20, 2026, the scale of what had occurred became clear in the cold light of satellite imagery and damage assessment reports. Ras Laffan's production capacity had been reduced by an estimated 30%. Mina al-Ahmadi was burning. Iran's drone carrier was on the bottom of the Gulf at 42 meters depth. 3 IRGC fast attack boats had been sunk. Bahrain had intercepted 143 total missiles and 242 total drones since the war began 22 days prior, a defensive intercept rate that represented the most intense sustained missile defense operation in history. The IEAIA issued an emergency communique urging governments worldwide to activate strategic petroleum reserves, reduce highway speed limits, and mandate working from home. The largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market had just been confirmed. Crude prices surged 22% in pre-market trading. Every airline, every shipping company, every utility grid dependent on LNG began running contingency calculations. And here is the most unsettling part of what you just witnessed. The IRGC's missiles that struck Ras Laffan were not their most capable weapons. They were not Fateh 110 precision-guided variants. They were not Zulfaghar 2 with their 700-kilometer range. The IRGC's strategic ballistic missile arsenal, the The Shahab 3D, the Ahmad, the Ghadr, was being held in reserve, their mobile T-EL launchers dispersed across hardened positions deep in the Zagros Mountains. What the world witnessed on March 19th was not Iran's maximum effort, it was their opening bid, and the Strait of Hormuz, still technically open, remained guarded by IRGC patrol craft operating under explicit orders to challenge every tanker transit. Iran's foreign ministry had already sent a letter to the International Maritime Organization stating that security in the strait was contingent on the cessation of all military aggression against the Islamic Republic. That is not a diplomatic statement. That is a loaded gun held against the temple of the global economy. CENTCOM did not blink. The B-2s are still in theater. The carrier strike groups are still on station. And in 3 weeks, 2,500 U.S. Marines aboard the USS Boxer will arrive at the mouth of the most contested waterway on Earth. The question that every strategic analyst in Washington, Beijing, Riyadh, and Moscow is asking right now is the same question that should be keeping you awake tonight. When a nation has already demonstrated the willingness to strike the world's largest gas facility and has the capability to shut the Strait of Hormuz entirely, what does the next escalation rung look like? And more critically, does the United States have a response ready before the world finds out? The Persian Gulf has always been called the world's gas station, but gas stations can burn. And right now, the fire has already started. Stay informed, stay sharp, and remember, the price of energy ignorance is measured not in dollars per barrel, but in the speed of strategic decisions made by men in command centers while the world sleeps. The next 18 days, until the USS Boxer arrives on station, will define whether this war remains a regional catastrophe or becomes something the history books will struggle to categorize. Would you like to know what happens if Iran closes the strait completely? Because that scenario has already been war-gamed, and the results are not what anyone wants to see.